Hey guys, you know me. I'm your friend Arnav Gupta, and I am here to teach you about effective ways in preparing a lesson. What I have got here for you today is a lesson, but the reason why you guys should be interested is because everything I tell you will make you better at public speaking and getting your message across. Everything I prepared today is from our not so good in-class teaching demonstrations. So, let's go now into the keys. The first key before you begin lecturing at all is to know your audience. Without us knowing who we are talking to and the context that they are in, we won't be able to engage with each other. Alan Alda mentions this in his book, and he calls it empathy. He states that we must let everything about them, the audience, affect you. If we are able to do this, our lesson plan will be much more effective in getting across to the audience. We saw the importance of knowing the audience on our very first day of our teaching demonstrations in class. Nadia came into class prepared to give her speech the way she had rehearsed. However, she was forced to improvise her lesson as her audience had changed. Her audience was now much younger. She had to use a softer tone and ask a lot of questions to make sure the listener was on track. The ability to know the audience through improvisation was one of Alda's key exercises to build empathy and connections to people. Without this connection with the audience, we won't be able to know what is important to the audience in terms of your own lecture. The next key for us all in creating a lesson plan is ranking our sentences. This does not mean that we physically rank them and that this sentence may be more important than this sentence, but it may mean that there are some places you're going to want to be relatable and other places you want to be authoritative. There are also going to be places where you're going to want to dial it up and places you want to dial it down. This means as we create our lesson plan, we're going to want to annotate and make these comments, as you don't want to have the same tone throughout or your audience may get bored. This was seen on our second day of our in-class teaching demonstrations when Ish, Neha, and Emma had to perform their lesson plans, but in the context of a campfire. Now their lesson plan was forced into a conversation that went back and forth. In the beginning, each of their conversations seemed independent of each other's. The conversations did not build upon the other conversations in the campfire. This exercise highlighted the importance of 1, responsive listening, and 2, the need to be engaging through varied sentence structures. This is because in a campfire situation, you must build upon what others are saying while adding your own relatable material and varied situations based on the ongoing conversation. With an annotated lesson plan, we are able to do so much more effectively. The last key, but definitely not the least, is making sure our lesson plans have program flexibility. From the first 2 slides, we noticed that we will never know who the audience is or the context we will be delivering our speeches in. Therefore, it is imperative that we have internal flexibility in making our lesson plan to fit all these circumstances. The things we can do to help ourselves do this better is 1, having a beginning and an end. In any of these circumstances, we're going to have the same start and the same finish, but the way we get from point A to point B may vary. Also, we're going to want to use rhetorical questions. These rhetorical questions are a way to lead and pave the thinking for the audience. They're a starting place and a way to get the audience to begin having the same thinking as you. Lastly, we want to create our lesson plan. We want to be thinking about the questions that the audience will have. If we can predict these questions while creating our lesson plans, not only will we be able to limit the amount of questions the audience has, but we might actually be able to program in gaps in our material so that the audience notices these gaps, has questions, and can help them in directing their own thinking. In the last day of our in-class teaching demonstrations, I noticed the importance of program flexibility the most. Catherine, Ashley, and I had to have a conversation about our lesson plan, but everything had to be in the form of a question. Right off the bat, I realized the importance of the rhetorical questions I had in my own script. But then I noticed that I could not use much of my script as I had very few questions. Quickly, I had to formulate my own questions on the top of my head. If my script had more program flexibility, in which I just jotted down the main points, such as the start and the finish, then I could have formulated questions about the internal material as I went along. Lastly, when giving my lesson plan to the class was allowed to ask any question that came to their head. I was bombarded with questions that I did not expect would arise during my lesson plan. This is when I realized the importance of thinking of questions that the audience will be thinking about during your lesson plan. This is great so that you're not thrown off your feet when you get a question that you did not expect. This is also important so that you can leave out information so that the audience can formulate their own opinions and their own questions to aid in their own thinking. I would now like to go over a revised version of one slide of my old teaching demonstration. On the left here, we see that each of these cells have a wall, or what us people in biology like to call a plasma membrane. All the plasma membrane does is separate the inside of the cell from the outside of the cell, just like a wall would. In order to send signals from the inside of the cell to the outside, we're going to need a gate inside this plasma membrane. On the right hand here, we have a close-up view of a plasma membrane. Just a side note, the cytoplasm down here is everything inside the cell, and the extracellular space up here is everything outside the cell. So what is that in between? Yes, you guys are all so smart. That is the plasma membrane. So all you smart people must be wondering, what are those green tubes inside the plasma membrane? Well, that is actually the gate that is going to allow chloride to get across the plasma membrane, aka the wall. But in people with cystic fibrosis, this gate is not going to work. A faulty chloride receptor gate is a culprit and the cause of the reason why patients with cystic fibrosis cannot send the chloride signal outside of their cell. In my updated teaching demonstration, it was apparent that I tried to involve the audience more. I asked a rhetorical question that they knew the answer to, and I also stated, hey, you guys are so smart. By reassuring the audience and making sure that they are on the right track, the audience will feel more engaged. I also added characters. I stated that the culprit of cystic fibrosis is a receptor. By adding characters, your lesson plan will feel more like a story with plot. I also tried to use hand gestures and had less stumbles. This involved using bullet points instead of my entire script, so I wasn't reading sentences and had to memorize where I left off. I hope you guys all enjoyed this lesson, and you guys will become better at public speaking and teaching in the future. Thank you.